So there is a deadline tonight in a case involving the abortion drug mifepristone. A U.S. district judge in Texas ordered the FDA's approval of that drug be suspended. The Justice Department was quick to ask a federal appeals court to put a hold on that order, calling it extraordinary and unprecedented.
Yeah, plaintiffs have until tonight to respond to the request for that hold. As John Lawrence reports, if no action is taken, the drug could be unavailable by the end of this week.
The clock is ticking for mifepristone. That's the first pill in the 2-dose regimen that can terminate a pregnancy through 10 weeks gestation.
This is a pill that's been around for more than 20 years, I believe 22 years. It's been used in 60 countries.
However, Texas federal judge Matthew Kaczmarek ruled the FDA should suspend approval of the drug, saying the agency didn't consider the trauma and stress women can suffer from ending a pregnancy.
We are ready to fight. This is going to be a long fight. We understand this. We stand by FDA's approval.
Dozens of officials from biotech and pharmaceutical companies signed an open letter backing the FDA's right to, quote, regulate safe, effective medicines for every American. Republican Representative Nancy Mace agrees, even though she considers herself pro-life.
I think that 90% would be okay with listening to the FDA rather than a judge who used an old law that was determined unconstitutional by the Supreme Court.
As the legal matter over the judge's ruling lies in limbo, abortion access varies significantly across the U.S.
Here in Texas, we have a heartbeat bill that was passed, and I think it's important that states dictate their futures, and we have to have the courts uphold these.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
So we want to bring in our medical expert, Dr. Payal Kohli, to talk about the drug and the implications of this recent ruling. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
So first, talk about this drug, mifepristone, and what it's approved for by the FDA.
So, as we heard, it's approved for ending a pregnancy in the first 10 weeks of that pregnancy. Been around for over 2 decades, has an impeccable safety record. But there's actually also other indications. So it's also approved for women who miscarry, and then, they don't want to have the surgery to actually empty the uterus, so they can use this medication to do so. And there's a condition called Cushing's syndrome, where you have an excess of cortisol that this drug is also approved for. Because what this drug does is it actually binds the progesterone receptor, so it can not just regulate our hormones, but also affect our sugar levels and other such things. So some medical indications for this medication as well.
Yeah, and what are the medical implications here if this is taken off the market?
I mean, incredible. This is really unprecedented in the world of medicine, and every doctor is really on the edge of their seat, waiting to see what's going to happen. Because even states like Colorado, where medical abortion is legal, could actually have lack of access to this medication. And we know that mifepristone is actually used in about 50% of terminations of pregnancy. So it's a large proportion of pregnancies that could get affected. And then when you talk about the non-pregnancy implications, such as the ones with Cushing's, how would those patients potentially be affected if access to this drug is limited?
Are there other drugs on the market that are like this?
Well, so that's what's interesting. Where there's a will, there's a way. So if you get rid of this drug for, medical termination of a pregnancy, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology actually has recommended a single drug regimen, and that's called misoprostol. It's usually mifepristone followed by misoprostol, which causes the uterus to expel whatever is in there. But if you just use misoprostol by itself, that is an alternative when mifepristone's not available. So I think there's still going to be people getting medical abortions, even if this drug gets overturned. But then what's going to happen? Are they then going to go after misoprostol? And then that opens that door in the Pandora's box for really going after all the drugs that the FDA feels are safe and efficacious.
A potential domino effect here. And how is the FDA and the AMA responding to this?
I mean, every medical organization has put out a statement, and the American Medical Association is saying that this really flies in the face of science. This is really overturning scientific opinion. The FDA is very concerned that this will undermine their credibility moving forward, not just with lawmakers, but also with drug companies, international organizations. So what exactly their authority will be in terms of saying, yes, we think that people should have access to this drug, it really stands in jeopardy here based on this particular ruling.
You were saying this is used oftentimes for women who miscarry, so they don't have to have the DNC. I know a lot of women do that. What about ectopic pregnancies? Is that used for this, or is that something different?
No, that's different, because
Okay.
that's where the pregnancy actually implants in the fallopian tube rather than in the uterus.
Okay.
So it's in the wrong place. But, you know, having a DNC is a traumatic procedure, especially for a woman who's just lost her pregnancy and miscarried. So this is a way in which she can sort of safely, you know, evacuate her uterus at home rather than having to go through this painful and kind of invasive surgical procedure. So I know we talk about the psychological impacts of using this medication for medical abortions, but in the case of miscarrying, I actually think it spares the woman a lot of psychological trauma because she can sort of expel the contents of her uterus at home, just like having a period, essentially.
And would your body naturally do that without the drug?
Not always.
Okay.
So sometimes if you retain the pregnancy when you miscarry, that's when it can really lead to complications. And so this kind of helps to sort of safely terminate your pregnancy, knowing that it's not, you know, going to be viable. So I'm really concerned that this has started, you know, a really scary precedent for us in the medical community. What this means for what the FDA says, for what our clinical trials do, you know, the science and the way that we really hang our hat on something being safe and efficacious, and this just getting overturned.
All right, Dr. Kohli, we always appreciate your expertise. Thanks for being here.